Friends, if you are excited to watch the action-packed and thrilling movie Havoc 2025 in English, then make sure you give this video a like. And if you are visiting our channel for the very first time, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on the latest movie updates. Friends, in today's video we are going to talk about Havoc 2025, a film that promises intense drama, jaw-dropping action, and a gripping storyline. We will explore what this movie is all about, where you can watch it, and all the exciting facts surrounding it. In today's video, I will share details about which OTT platform or satellite channel will feature Havoc 2025, along with all the behind-the-scenes insights. We will talk about the technical department, the music team, the pre-production process, filming, post-production stages, budget, and the box office expectations for this movie. I will also walk you through the plot and give you a short review of the story so you can decide whether this film deserves a spot on your watch list. Apart from that, we will discuss the fascinating facts about Havoc 2025, the storyline, the star cast, and how each actor has delivered their performance. You will also get to know which actor plays which character, making it easier for you to connect with the film when you watch it. So my friends, I request you to stay with me till the end of this video, because we are about to dive deep into all the thrilling details of Havoc 2025. Now, let's get started. Havoc throws you straight into a city that feels soaked in neon rain and bad decisions. The opening move is cheeky and explosive, a small-time crew jacks, washing machines. Not for the spin cycle, but for the cocaine hidden inside them, and the theft sets off a chain reaction of chases, botched busts, and wounded cops. The tone is clear from minute one. This is a crime story that sprints, and every sprint leaves bruises. From here, the plot stays largely linear but pings between factions like a pinball. Thieves, narcotics officers who don't mind getting their hands dirty, a triad outfit splintering from within, and the political class that pretends to be above it all while tugging strings below the table. The first big turn is a massacre that shouldn't happen. Two of the thieves, Charlie and Mia, bring the coke to a local triad boss, Suey, only for a masked hit squad to storm the place and reduce that deal to smoke and shell casings. Charlie and Mia barely slip the net, and suddenly the city's underworld thinks those kids pulled the trigger. That misdirection is the movie's favorite trick. Every time you think you know who's hunting whom, the target shifts, and the hunters turn out to be working for someone else entirely. Enter Patrick Walker, a homicide detective with a moral compass that spins like a broken fan. He's estranged at home, compromised at work, and in the pocket of Lawrence Beaumont, a mayoral hopeful who also happens to be Charlie's father. When Charlie is named as the triad boss's killer, Lawrence orders Walker to find his son before the rival factions do. This is where the narrative snaps into a propulsive A-to-B manhunt. Walker and his rookie partner Ellie hop from lead to lead while the city narrows its jaws. The structure is classic chase thriller, but it feels like a side-scrolling brawler. Every location is a new level, every door opens to another ambush. The plot thickens with a formidable new presence. Suey's mother arrives, known in whispers as Mother, and immediately throws old world weight around. She's not buying the official story, and she doesn't negotiate with the genteel menace of politicians. Lawrence is yanked from his motorcade, and Power stops pretending to be polite. The abduction reroutes the entire narrative current. This is no longer just a rescue of a politician's son, it's a war of succession in the shadows, where family, loyalty, and face matter as much as money. Midway, the movie detonates its showpiece in a nightclub that plays like a thesis statement. Walker corners Mia through her forger uncle, and within minutes, the dance floor becomes a three-way meat grinder. Dirty cops, triad hitters, and our fugitives all colliding under strobes. It's not just action, it's plot revelation delivered through chaos. Mia fingers Vincent, a narcotics lieutenant, as the real triggerman behind Suey's death, and suddenly the crooked cop subplot stops being sub and becomes the main artery. Characters drop like confetti. Walker, Mia, and a wounded Charlie slip out, but the story leaves a pile of bodies to mark the turn. From here, the film tightens its vice. We learn the massacre was an inside job. Vincent and his crew weren't chasing stolen coke, they were hijacking it, partnered with Ching, Suey's embittered lieutenant who wants the throne for himself. With that reveal, every earlier pursuit snaps into focus. The narrative's emotional gear engages too. Walker's cynicism starts to crack under Ellie's steadiness and the raw, stubborn bond forming between Charlie and Mia. The city stops feeling like a backdrop and starts acting like a pressure cooker, forcing choices that can't be taken back. The third act is a siege that plays like the story's beating heart. Walker stashes Charlie and Mia at his late father's cabin, and the location becomes an anvil. Triad gunmen swarm, Mother's enforcer brings knives to a gunfight and makes you wish she hadn't, and Walker absorbs punishment that would fold a lesser man. The battle isn't just spectacle, it clears the fog. Ellie arrives with the receipts, Ching's betrayal, the dirty cop's collusion, and the film flips its hierarchy. The supposed kingmakers are revealed as scavengers. In the crossfire, loyalties prove costly, and a father shields a son in a moment that reframes earlier scenes with a gut punch of clarity. The finale pares everything down to pure momentum. Walker and Vincent, the two sides of the city's corroded badge, hurtle toward each other on an elevated train. Their showdown lands less like good versus evil and more like a reckoning between compromised choices. Elsewhere, Ellie faces down another bad cop, and Charlie, having been chased like prey all film long, finally acts with grim agency. The last beats leave the fugitives facing the unknown, Ellie choosing compassion over procedure, and Walker staring at the oncoming lights of consequence. Thematically, it's a hard-boiled echo. In a place where institutions are hollowed out, the only moral choices are made one exhausted, painful step at a time. So, does Havoc play with time or structure? Not really, the timeline is straightforward. What it plays with is perspective and control. Every power center thinks it's writing the story until a louder gun, a truer loyalty, or a braver lie seizes the pen. The key turns, the nightclub revelation, Mother's kidnap gambit, the cabin siege, and the train confrontation, recalibrate the stakes while pushing characters into sharper relief. The emotional spine isn't speeches, it's decisions under duress. Ellie refusing to become the system she's trapped in, Walker asking to pay for his sins, Charlie and Mia choosing flight over surrender. That's the sneaky trick beneath the brawls and bullets. The movie keeps telling you it's about loot, territory, and survival, but what it really measures, beat by bruised beat, is the cost of staying human when the city teaches you to be something else. Havoc doesn't just throw characters at you as action movie archetypes and leave them there. It chips away at them, scene by scene, until you start to see the fractures, the fears, and the quiet moments that actually drive them. Patrick Walker, for example, enters the story as the kind of cop you think you've met before. A man with a badge, a reputation, and a moral compass that's been magnetized by too many backroom deals. At first, he's just the fixer, doing Lawrence Beaumont's dirty work while keeping his own career barely afloat. But as the hunt for Charlie drags him through the city's underbelly, Walker's detachment starts to crack. He's not suddenly reborn as a shining hero. Instead, you watch him wrestle with the idea that maybe, just maybe, he's been on the wrong side of the ledger for too long. His growth isn't loud, it's in the way he hesitates before pulling a trigger, in the grudging respect he shows his rookie partner, and in the way he shields people who, in Act 1, he might have fed to the wolves. Ellie, the rookie, is almost the inverse. She starts clean, fresh-faced, and determined to play by the rules. In the early scenes, she looks like she could be steamrolled by the city in a week. But Havoc doesn't give her that easy out. Each encounter with corruption, each violent detour, hardens her just enough to keep her standing. What's interesting is that she doesn't become jaded in the way you'd expect. She learns to bend the rules without breaking her own principles. The biggest mark of her development is in the way she confronts Vincent. There's no wide-eyed shock left, no hesitation. She acts decisively, not because she's lost her moral center, but because she's learned that justice sometimes needs sharper edges. Charlie Beaumont is the reluctant fugitive, a character who could have been all whining and bad luck, but instead, he shifts from being purely reactive to taking charge of his own survival. At the start, he's a pawn, caught between criminal factions, his father's political ambitions, and Walker's orders. He runs because that's all he knows how to do. But somewhere between dodging bullets in nightclubs and bleeding out in a cabin, Charlie grows a spine. By the end, his choices are deliberate, even when they're dangerous, and that transformation lands harder because you've seen him at his most helpless. Mia, Charlie's partner in trouble, is perhaps the most quietly compelling arc in the film. She begins as the cool, competent half of the duo, quick-thinking, sharp-tongued, and used to surviving by keeping her cards close. But as the walls close in, you start to see the strain in her armor. She's loyal in ways she probably shouldn't be, and it costs her, but it also makes her human. Her revelations about Vincent give her a vital role in the larger plot, shifting her from sidekick to key player. By the time she and Charlie make their final escape, her toughness isn't just a shield, it's a choice to keep going, even when she's got every reason to stop. Then there's Mother, Sui's formidable matriarch, who doesn't so much evolve as she reveals deeper layers the more you watch her operate. She arrives like a storm, all presence and authority, and you expect a blunt instrument of vengeance. Instead, you get a strategist, someone who understands the value of intimidation, patience, and timing. Her relationship with her son's empire, Her willingness to snatch a politician off the street, and her absolute control over her enforcers make her one of the most magnetic figures in the film. Every choice she makes pushes the other characters into tighter corners, forcing growth whether they want it or not. Vincent, the crooked narcotics lieutenant, doesn't have an arc so much as he has a reveal. Every step in his journey peels back another layer of duplicity. At first, he's just another bad cop in a city full of them. But as you see the massacre traced back to him, as you watch him manipulate the chaos for his own gain, he becomes the embodiment of the film's rot. His presence shapes the arcs of everyone else. He's the mirror for Walker's worst tendencies, the force that pushes Ellie into decisive action, and the reason Charlie and Mia's flight never lets up. The relationships between these characters are as much the story as the bullets and betrayals. Walker and Ellie's dynamic shifts from teacher-student to something more like mutual respect between battle-scarred equals. Charlie and Mia's bond evolves from necessity to choice, which makes their survival matter more. Walker's begrudging empathy for Charlie is one of the film's subtle emotional beats. By the time they share that brief, wordless moment in the cabin, you realize that every conversation, every chase, has been building toward that fragile connection. Havoc's characters don't just move the plot forward, they reshape it, bending the story around their decisions, mistakes, and shifting loyalties. Watching them change is half the entertainment, because in a world this ruthless, growth isn't about becoming better. It's about finding the sliver of yourself you can still live with, and holding on to it when everything else is trying to tear it away. Havoc is the kind of movie where you can feel the actors breathing life into the chaos, each performance slotting into place like a gear in a machine that's constantly threatening to overheat. Tom Hardy, as Patrick Walker, doesn't just play the role. He wears it like a second skin. He's got that trademark mix of gruff physicality and quiet vulnerability, and he knows exactly when to let each surface. One scene he's smashing through a door like he's trying to convince the wood it owes him money, and the next he's standing still, letting the silence between lines do more work than a monologue ever could. His Walker isn't just believable, he's lived in, a man who's been walking a crooked line so long he barely notices it's bent. The real surprise is the dynamic between Hardy and his rookie partner, played with sharp energy by Jessie Maylie. She brings a clarity and restraint to Ellie that makes every choice feel deliberate. She never plays the rookie as naive. Instead, she threads that fine line between inexperience and raw determination. In the hands of a less precise actor, Ellie could have been overshadowed by Walker's hulking presence, but Jessie Maylie holds her ground, sometimes literally, squaring her shoulders in a way that makes you feel she's not just surviving the city, she's learning to own it. Timothy Olyphant as Lawrence Beaumont is all controlled charm and thinly veiled menace. He's the politician who can shake your hand while deciding whether you're worth saving or sacrificing, and Olyphant nails that duality. His scenes with Hardy crackle because they're playing two kinds of predators, one operating in the alleys, the other in the boardrooms, and watching them circle each other adds a layer of tension even when no one's holding a gun. Michelle Yeoh as Mother is pure command on screen. She doesn't waste a single movement or syllable. When she walks into a scene, you instantly understand why grown men lower their eyes. What makes her performance sing is the way she balances menace with precision. She's not just the heavy, she's the strategist. Even her quiet moments have teeth, and when she finally unleashes her fury, it feels like the movie's air pressure drops a notch. Yeoh has that rare ability to make you lean in just to catch the shift in her tone, and here, that talent turns every one of her appearances into an event. Pedro Pascal as Vincent gives you the kind of villain that sticks in your head because he doesn't overplay it. His charisma is undeniable. There's a warmth to his voice that makes you want to trust him right before he cuts the ground out from under you. It's that easy, unforced charm that makes Vincent dangerous. Pascal understands that menace is more effective when it's wrapped in a smile, and he uses that to make every betrayal sting a little more. Callum Turner and Yahya Abdul-Mateen too, as Charlie and Ching, bring very different but equally magnetic energies. Turner plays Charlie with just enough awkwardness to make his transformation believable. You can see the fear in his eyes early on, and when he starts making bolder moves, that history of panic gives them weight. Abdul-Mateen takes Ching from loyal lieutenant to hungry usurper with a fluid, simmering performance that makes his betrayal sting. His physical presence is imposing, but it's the intelligence behind his eyes that makes you believe he could outmaneuver half the city. Even the smaller roles pop. Character actors who could have faded into the noise of this busy world instead make you believe every corner of it is inhabited by someone with their own story. From the jittery forger uncle who steals his brief scene with dry humor, to the triad enforcer whose silent stare feels like a promise you don't want fulfilled, Havoc's supporting cast keeps the edges of the frame alive. What's striking is how these performances work together. The actors aren't just doing good work in isolation, they're playing off each other in ways that deepen the story. Hardy's guarded weariness makes Jessie May Lee's measured idealism sharper. Yeoh's icy control turns Pascal's casual charm into something more dangerous. Oliphant's smooth power games heighten the tension in Hardy's moral struggle. Every interaction feels like it's carrying more weight than the words alone, and that's the kind of chemistry you can't fake. It's built, moment by moment, in performances that know exactly what kind of storm they're in. The director sets the film's pulse from the opening minute and never lets your ears, eyes, or nerves forget it. Tone arrives first, a bruised, propulsive crime story that treats action not as decoration but as language. You feel it in the way scenes begin mid-motion. Doors already swinging, sirens already echoing, the city already sweating, and then decelerate just long enough for you to catch the subtext in a glance or a half-finished sentence. The mood is neon grit under rain, but it isn't style for style's sake. The lighting keeps telling you who has power. Politicians bask in soft, flattering warmth. Clubs pulse with sickly greens and purples where loyalties blur. The cabin siege drains into moonlit blues and gunmetal shadows that make every corner a threat. Even the elevated train finale uses reflections to trap faces in their own choices, panes of glass turning into moving confessionals. Shot composition is ruthlessly legible. The director establishes geography early with wide masters, streets, stairwells, the layout of a nightclub's mezzanines, so when the camera dives into close-quarters mayhem, you never lose your bearings. It's the opposite of chaos cinema. Long, muscular takes when bodies collide, cut not to create energy but to release it at precisely chosen beats. Fights read like arguments written in elbows and furniture. You see setups and payoffs within single movements. Hands hunt for leverage, weapons run dry, characters switch stances because they're tired, not because a choreographer thought it would look cool. That fatigue is the storytelling. Injuries accumulate, breath gets louder, decisions slow a fraction, and the scene evolves from dominance to survival without a line of dialogue. Pacing is engineered like a heist. Tight preamble, explosive complication, staccato aftermath. The film alternates high-velocity set pieces with investigative breathers that still hum with tension. Those breathers aren't dead air, they're where the director compresses theme. A quiet car ride becomes a seminar in power dynamics through who sits where, who watches the rear view, who looks away first at a red light. A phone call runs longer than you expect, not to stall the plot, but to let you hear lies get built in real time. Then the throttle opens again and you're in that nightclub, where the soundtrack's low-end thump becomes a metronome for the edit. Cuts land on bass hits, muzzle flashes syncopate with strobes, and the camera slips from balcony to floor with a predatory smoothness that makes the geography feel like an enemy of its own. The narrative vision is classic on the surface, linear clockwork, but the direction plays shell games with point of view. Information is rationed by allegiance. Scenes with cops frame the city like a chessboard, clean angles and institutional spaces. Scenes with triad operatives skew tighter and lower, as if the camera is ducking with them. Scenes tied to the political machine are composed like campaign photoshoots, carefully symmetrical and faintly unreal. When Mother enters, the visual language shifts, wider lenses and longer holds, granting her gravity that bends other characters' orbits. When the plot pivots on that abduction, the style pivots too. The motorcade is staged with ceremonial calm, and the moment of rupture is shot with blunt, almost documentary indifference, as if to say power is only impressive until someone simply takes it. Sound design is a co-director. Guns don't bark the same in alleys and in stairwells, and the mix respects the difference. You get the clatter of dropped magazines, the scrape of boots on tile, the wet weight of a body hitting a banquet table. Dialogue rides above the storm without becoming clean. There's grit in the room tone, a sense that the city itself is interfering. Music doesn't tell you how to feel so much as it measures how long you have before the next bad thing happens. In the cabin siege, cues drop out altogether to let the wind and the timber creaks set your teeth on edge, and when the score returns it's like a hand tightening on a wire. Blocking is character work. The director loves lines of approach, hallways, bridges, trains, because they force choices. Walker's default posture is forward pressure. He crowds door frames and steals ground with his shoulders. Ellie learns spacing over the course of the film, going from reactive pivots to claiming angles before the other guy even notices she moved. Villains are staged with indulgent distance early on, lounging behind furniture or glass. As their plans unravel, their spaces shrink until they too are pressed into corners, the lens practically measuring their panic. Editorial rhythm keeps promises. Early scenes seed micro-rules that pay dividends later. If a weapon enters frame, the camera tracks where it goes. If a character scans a room, the cut pattern mirrors their eye line. If a hit lands, the receiver gets the next shot so the audience feels the transfer of momentum. When the train sequence arrives, those rules let the director escalate without confusion. Reflections aren't just pretty, they're used to cue threats a split second early, and when the final lunge happens, the cut lands late enough to make you flinch but early enough to feel earned. Even the city is directed like a cast member. Weather isn't mood lighting, it's strategy. Rain turns alleys into skating rinks, headlights into blinders. Daylight sequences feel almost indecent, as if corruption should hide from the sun, and whenever someone tries to make a clean deal in the open, the frame crowds with onlookers or construction noise, a reminder that public space is never private. Interiors tell class stories. Lacquered wood and velvet for the politicos, sharp steel and laminated surfaces for the cops, concrete and red light for the crews who actually bleed. The cumulative effect is a film that moves with purpose because the direction never stops making choices. Tone is a contract. Pain counts, consequences stick, violence communicates, and the camera honors it. Mood is a pressure system that rises and falls across scenes without ever venting completely. Storytelling isn't just what happens, it's how you're allowed to perceive it, and here the director grants clarity like a privilege you have to earn. The cinematography in Havoc doesn't just record the story, it shapes it, breathing mood and tension into every frame. From the opening scene, the camera establishes its philosophy. You're not a passive observer, you're in the middle of the mess. Angles are chosen to make you feel like you're standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Low shots from behind crates during shootouts, wide overheads that make you realize just how exposed the characters are, and sudden close-ups that drag you into the intensity of a stare or the twitch of a trigger finger. It's not about showing everything, it's about showing the right thing at the exact moment it matters. Lighting plays a double role, practical and emotional. In political offices and luxury apartments, everything is warmly lit, shadows soft, lines clean, selling a false sense of safety. Step into the streets at night, and the light shifts to harsher sources. Sodium lamps that stain the world amber, fluorescent flickers that hint at decay, neon that pulses like a warning sign. The nightclub sequence turns this into visual warfare. Faces are sliced by alternating colors, strobe effects fragment the action into surreal stills, and every muzzle flash temporarily rewrites the color palette. Then you get the cabin siege, where the lighting becomes minimalist moonlight and firelight, so every shadow feels like it's about to move, and every gunshot illuminates danger for a fraction of a second before plunging you back into uncertainty. Framing is where the cinematography becomes a silent narrator. In conversations, the frame often traps characters in doorways, window panes, or reflections, quietly reminding you that everyone is boxed in by their circumstances. Action scenes expand the frame, giving you full spatial awareness before snapping tight for impact when violence erupts. The elevated train showdown is a masterclass in this. Long lenses compress the space between hunter and hunted, making every step toward each other feel like a forced march, while reflections in the train's glass double the characters, creating the impression that they're confronting not just their enemy but themselves. One of the most striking choices is the way the camera moves with weight. In chases, it's not floating, it runs, sways, and occasionally stumbles like a participant trying to keep up. During fights, the lens breathes with the actors, pulling back when they're recovering, surging forward when a blow lands. In the quieter moments, it settles into stillness, letting the audience lean in to hear the unspoken tension. The contrast between this stillness and the kinetic sequences makes the bursts of violence hit harder. Depth of field becomes another storytelling tool. In scenes where trust is uncertain, the cinematography often keeps one character razor-sharp in focus while letting the background drift into blur, subtly guiding your attention to the one who's in control. Conversely, moments of chaos often flatten the depth so that multiple threats feel equally close, crowding the frame and denying you a clear point of safety. Even the city's texture is treated with a cinematic respect that makes it a character in its own right. Rain-slick streets aren't just pretty, they're reflective surfaces that double the lights, making every street lamp look like a trap and every police cruiser twice as close. Graffiti, peeling posters, and cracked walls aren't background noise. They're framed deliberately to suggest the decay that's eating away at institutions and people alike. In daylight, the cinematography drains some of the color, making the world feel washed out and overexposed, as if truth in this city is something harsh and uncomfortable to look at. And then there are the moments that burn into memory. Walker framed in silhouette against the flashing lights of a burning car, Mother stepping into a hallway lit only by a swinging bulb, her shadow preceding her like an omen, Ellie and Vincent standoff in a tight corridor, the focus shifting between them like the camera itself is deciding whose choice will matter more. These are the images that carry the emotional weight long after the scene is over. The cinematography doesn't just make Havoc look good, it makes it feel lived in, dangerous, and unpredictable. Every angle, light source, and frame composition is another thread in the tension, pulling you deeper until you're not just watching the story, you're trapped inside it. The editing in Havoc is the nervous system that keeps the whole thing from collapsing into noise. Every cut feels purposeful, like the film is breathing through its wounds. Early on, the editor establishes a set of rules: wide masters and clear geography to orient you, then tighter cuts to deliver impact, which means action never devolves into confusing quick-snap montage because you always know where bodies, doors, and exits are in relation to each other. The opening heist is edited like a sprint, short, taut shots stitched with match-on action so momentum never stumbles. You feel the theft as a series of micro-decisions rather than one big stunt, and that makes the consequences land harder. In contrast, the investigation beats use L-cuts and J-cuts, letting audio lead into the next image so conversations flow without feeling stagey. Those sound-led transitions are a brilliant trick for preserving rhythm while you get a lot of exposition. The nightclub sequence is a textbook on rhythmic violence. Edits land on strobe hits and bass drops, slices of motion that fragment the frame into shocking tableaus, but the choreography of cuts still preserves who's where. Camera, choreography, and cut pattern conspire to make chaos legible. The cabin siege flips that playbook: longer takes, sustained coverage, and a generosity of spatial cuts so the siege feels like a single pressing event rather than a chopped-up highlight reel. The slower editing there makes each gunshot and injury accumulate weight, which in turn deepens the emotional toll on the characters. Cross-cutting is used smartly rather than gratuitously. When the story splits between Walker on the train and Ellie chasing a lead, the intercutting builds urgency by shortening the duration of each return, tightening the viewer's stomach without losing the narrative through line. Pacing-wise, the film mostly rides a high-low wave, explosive set pieces followed by investigative lunges, but there are a few stretches where the procedural detail lingers longer than necessary. Those breaths give stakes and context, yet if you're impatient they can feel like the film pulling its brakes to read the map before racing again. The editor also loves ellipses. Time is collapsed with quick montages when the plot needs to advance, surveillance reels, phone check montages, the passage of a long night, so momentum never stalls, but crucial emotional beats are given generous frames. Reaction shots held a beat too long, an unadorned stare, the sound of breathing, that micro-slowing is what turns action into consequence. Continuity editing is treated like a baseline ethic. Cut on action, maintain eye lines, and use match cuts to preserve spatial clarity, which is why the more kinetic sequences never betray geography. Meanwhile, rhythmic editing, cutting to score hits, using silence as punctuation, gives the film a musicality that makes pacing feel intentional rather than mechanical. When the music drops out, the cuts lengthen and the tension sharpens. Small editing flourishes pay big dividends: a flash cut to a reflection that foreshadows a betrayal, a whip pan into a close-up to simulate a character's panic, or a sudden long take that forces you to watch a plan unravel in real time. Emotionally, the rhythm guides empathy. Rapid-fire cuts during panic make you feel breathless alongside the characters, while held takes after loss let grief settle in your chest. The editing also subtly steers moral perspective. Scenes favoring Walker are cut to show the slow erosion of his resolve, scenes with Ellie use brisker, more purposeful cuts to mark her clarity, and scenes with the triad employ tighter, almost claustrophobic edits that make power feel like a pressure cooker. There's excellent use of cutaways and secondary beats to keep the world alive, little details that editors often bury: a hand fiddling with a lighter, a news broadcast in the background, are given microcuts that later function as payoff hooks. If the film has a rhythmic signature, it's this alternation between sprint and crouch, and the editor's restraint in choosing when to speed up or slow down is what keeps the film from becoming exhausting. The few moments that do drag are usually deliberate texture rather than slackness, and even when the pace rushes, usually in the rush to climax stretches, those choices sell the sense of a city collapsing under its own momentum. The overall effect is not just that the plot moves, but that the viewer's pulse is edited alongside it, and the film keeps you oriented, charged, and very often on the edge of your seat. The soundtrack of Havoc works like a secret narrator that never tells you what to think but always tells you how to feel, folding into the film so seamlessly that music becomes part of the city's architecture rather than an add-on. It opens with tight, percussive electronics during the heist, skinny, syncopated drum patterns and a low mechanical bass that mirror the film's jittery nerves, then slyly lets diegetic sounds, the whir of a washing machine drum, a car alarm, bleed into the score so the two blur and the theft feels both intimate and industrial. The composer loves contrasts. For the nightclub sequence, the score backs away to let the pounding club track dominate, and instead the underscore works beneath the bass with low-frequency pulses and eerie, sustained pads that turn the dance floor into a pressure chamber, so every flash of violence feels like it's landed on top of something already vibrating. Character motifs are cleverly economical and evolve with the people who carry them. Walker's music is built from a stubborn low brassish rumble combined with metallic percussion that sounds like a badge being rubbed raw, sturdy at first but fraying into single-note lamentations as his choices accumulate. Ellie gets a small, repeating piano cell that begins as a nervous tick and, scene by scene, thickens into layered strings and brass as she grows more decisive. Charlie and Mia share a fragile, two-note guitar phrase that's often left alone or half-heard, which makes the rare moments when it is fully arranged feel like an act of grace. Villains and power players get tonal signatures too. Mother's presence is accompanied by a cold, almost ritualistic motif in minor intervals, an arrangement that borrows from traditional percussion instruments to lend cultural weight and deliberate menace, while Vincent is underscored by slick, sliding synths that make his charm sound like a veneer over something corrosive. The film uses instrumental texture as emotional shorthand rather than musical exposition. When trust cracks, the strings thin out. When plans cohere, percussion tightens. When confusion reigns, field recordings and processed urban noise fill the lower register so the score never crowds the scene but instead occupies the spaces the visuals leave. Silence is treated like a composer's favorite instrument. Key beats, the moment before the cabin siege, a phone call that changes everything, the pause before the train fight, remove all music so the creak of floorboards, the hiss of breath, and the distant highway become deafening, and when music returns it lands like a verdict. There are recurring motifs, but they're mutable. Motifs shift instrumentation, tempo, and harmony to reflect character choices. What began as an electronic pulse might be reharmonized into strings in a later scene to show humanity bleeding through. Mixing choices support this storytelling. The score tends to sit under dialogue, leaving space for performance, but in the film's emotional crescendos the music nudges forward, not to overpower but to pull the audience's chest along with it, and the editor often aligns cuts to musical accents so rhythm and image form a single, persuasive argument. Textural moments stand out, a brittle, slowed-down vocal line in a late-night sequence that turns into a memory cue, a heartbeat-like sub-bass that synchronizes to on-screen tension, a percussive motif that migrates from sampled electronics to live taiko drums as stakes escalate. Each choice makes the soundscape feel handcrafted. In short, the score is a shapeshifter. Electronic and acoustic elements trade places, motifs evolve with character arcs, silence is weaponized for suspense, and the whole sound design acts like a second screenplay that reads emotion and amplifies it without ever hogging the scene. Havoc sneaks its themes in like pickpockets at a crowded station. You only notice what's missing once your pockets are lighter, and then the film keeps asking you who actually stole what. Is it money, power, or the small, quiet pieces of ourselves we trade away to survive? At the surface it's a crime story, but underneath it's a steady examination of corruption as both systemic rust and personal habit. The city isn't just where bad things happen, it's an active teacher, showing which compromises keep you warm for the night and which ones gradually burn you from the inside. Power here is performative and porous. Politicians practice cleanliness in well-lit rooms while the real negotiations happen in rain-slick alleys, and that gap between public face and private handshakes becomes a running question. Who gets to call something legitimate when everyone's hands are stained? Loyalty is another currency the film counts carefully. Family ties and crew bonds get measured in utility and sacrifice, so the gestures that look like devotion often double as debt. That's why the Beaumont father-son thread reads less like melodrama and more like a ledger. Ambition asks for collateral, and children sometimes pay without knowing the bill was due. Moral ambiguity is the film's favorite horizon. Characters aren't dressed as saints or villains but as people with credit histories of bad choices, which makes empathy complicated. You find yourself rooting for fugitives who steal for reasons that feel human, while also recognizing that their survival perpetuates harm. Identity and performance shuffle together. Vincent's charm is literally a veneer that lets violence wear a smile, Walker's badge is a costume that's been altered to fit graft, and Ellie's arc is a lesson in how a principled person learns to act inside a crooked machine without becoming another cog. Violence is treated as language rather than just spectacle. It punctuates negotiations, calibrates respect, and registers consequence. Every firefight rewrites social contracts, and the film uses physical injury as a ledger entry that changes who can ask for mercy. The city itself doubles as moral architecture. Lighting, crowds, and transit corridors are not just sets but moral geometries that force choices. Cornered spaces compress ethics, wide avenues expose pretenses. Recurring motifs, mirrors, reflections on wet pavement, the cyclical return to a cramped cabin, underscore how inescapable certain systems are. You can run, but the visual echoes remind you you're still inside the same loop. Questions of complicity crop up everywhere. Is the rookie who bends a rule to save a life a hero or a future problem? Is the politician who swaps favors for votes clever or dangerously adaptive? The film refuses to hand out simple moral receipts. Instead, it makes the audience weigh costs in real time, which is why its most resonant moments are small acts of humanity: an extra mouthful of food shared in a hideout, a cop who hesitates before pulling the trigger, because those slivers of decency prove harder to barter away than the grandstanding speeches. Justice is portrayed as messy and local rather than abstract. The film cares more about the immediate repairs people try to make to their lives than about any sweeping legal finality, and that keeps the stakes intimate. There's also a persistent meditation on consequence and inheritance, not just the literal family inheritance in a crime dynasty, but the cultural inheritance of how to wield fear, how to keep face, how to fold shame into strategy. And watching characters inherit and then either repeat or resist those lessons is a core pleasure of the film. Finally, Havoc toys with the idea that survival itself is a moral stance. Choosing to protect someone when it's costly reframes courage as refusal to participate in the transactional morality that the city teaches. The movie never sermonizes, it stages choices and then watches the moral bill come due, and by the time the credits loom you've been invited, repeatedly and uncomfortably, to tally your own responses. What would you give up? Who would you save? And when does self-preservation stop being survival and start being surrender? Havoc treats visual effects like seasoning in a perfectly balanced dish. You notice them because they enhance the flavor, not because they scream for attention. The cityscape shots, for example, rely on a subtle blend of practical set dressing and digital augmentation, so what you're seeing isn't some glossy, obviously fabricated skyline but a layered urban sprawl that feels lived in, with flickering neon signs, rain-slick rooftops, and traffic patterns that pulse like the city's bloodstream. The CGI here doesn't wave a flag and announce itself. It hides in plain sight, extending alleyways, deepening shadows, and filling out the kind of gritty street clutter that would take weeks to dress physically. Explosions are a perfect example. There's enough real pyrotechnics to give you that unmistakable shockwave in your chest, but digital enhancements sneak in to carry embers further, scatter debris with precision, and let the fire bloom just a little longer than physics normally allows. You feel the impact, smell the smoke in your imagination, and yet never think, oh, that's a green screen job. Gunfights benefit from this hybrid approach too. Muzzle flashes and dust bursts often come from practical squibs, while CGI adds fine particle detail in slow-motion beats, letting you see shards of concrete spin away in arcs too graceful for reality but too brief to feel staged. Water and rain effects are another standout. The production used real rainfall for texture, but CGI extends it into the distance, turning every chase sequence into something drenched, slick, and claustrophobic, as if the weather itself is another character pressuring the action. Even crowd scenes make clever use of digital duplication, populating plazas and markets without drawing attention to themselves. You don't see digital extras, you see a thrumming, unpredictable mass of humanity. Practical effects keep the tactile weight of the world intact. Broken furniture splinters under real impact, blood packs burst in messy, uncinematic ways, cars crumple like metal should when hit at speed, and the digital side complements rather than competes. There's a restraint in the approach that makes the visual effects invisible in the best way possible. You're never pulled out to admire a render because the point isn't to dazzle, it's to convince. That's why even large-scale sequences, like a helicopter sweeping in low over the city or a collapsing building trapping characters in a swirl of dust, don't feel like set pieces dropped in from another, flashier movie. They feel like natural extensions of the film's physical world, executed with a painter's sense of balance. Just enough reality to ground you, just enough digital touch to make the impossible seem inevitable. The magic of it is that by the time the credits roll, you realize you've just watched a movie where the effects worked so hard to disappear into the narrative that you never once thought about how they were done, you just believed every frame. Havoc builds its world like an obsessive craftsman who refuses to let a single corner go unpolished. Every location feels like it's been lived in for years before the cameras arrived, and that authenticity does more for immersion than any flashy effect ever could. The cramped apartments don't just have peeling wallpaper, they have water stains shaped by years of unnoticed leaks, mismatched furniture that tells you exactly what the tenants could afford, and shelves cluttered with personal trinkets that hint at entire backstories. The props aren't just functional, they're storytellers in themselves. A chipped coffee mug, a half-burned candle, a stack of unopened bills on the kitchen counter, these details whisper about lives off-screen, giving depth to even the briefest glimpses of a room. The street-level locations feel like a breathing organism, a patchwork of cultures, businesses, and chaos. Narrow alleys are stacked high with boxes and laundry lines, market stalls are bursting with produce and knockoff electronics, and graffiti ranges from crude scrawls to layered murals that almost deserve their own subplot. It's the kind of environment where you can freeze the frame and still discover something new each time. Interior sets, whether it's a dimly lit dive bar or a polished government office, are lit and dressed to fit the mood of the scene, but without feeling over-stylized. Paperwork is slightly askew, chairs are scuffed, and glass doors bear the faint fingerprints of everyone who's passed through. Even large-scale set pieces, like the under-construction skyscraper or the dockside warehouses, aren't just backdrops for action. They're interactive playgrounds that influence how the action unfolds, with characters ducking behind real steel beams, sliding across dusty floors, and using the space in ways that feel organic to the story. Locations outside the city core bring their own personality: a decaying rural house with warped floorboards that creak like they're warning intruders, a fog-draped riverbank where silence becomes its own kind of tension, or a windswept overpass where the horizon feels too open to be safe. The film also uses transitional spaces, stairwells, corridors, rooftops, not just as connectors but as emotional beats, letting the audience breathe or build tension before the next big turn. It's the kind of production design that doesn't just look good in a wide shot, it stands up to scrutiny at close range because it's layered with thought, history, and texture. By the end, you feel like you could navigate this world without a map, because it's been made so tangible that it stops feeling like a movie set and starts feeling like a place you've been. The dialogue in Havoc doesn't just fill the air between gunshots and chases, it feels like an extension of the characters themselves, each line shaped by their history, their motives, and the weight of the moment. Conversations flow with a natural rhythm, never sounding like actors reading from a page, but like people talking the way they would in a high-stakes world where every word could be a negotiation, a threat, or a lifeline. There's a sharpness to the exchanges that keeps you leaning in, not because every line is quotable, but because each one feels like it matters. The script knows when to let silence hang, when to land a line like a punch to the gut, and when to slide in a touch of humor just to let the tension breathe. The wit isn't showy, it comes in the form of dry retorts, clever understatements, or sarcastic jabs that reveal personality without derailing the tone. Emotional beats are handled with precision. A simple "I'm fine" can feel heavier than a tearful confession when it's delivered in a moment loaded with unspoken meaning. There are also those rare lines that hit with such clarity you can feel them lingering in the room long after they're said. Statements that define not just the scene, but the core of the story. The script avoids over-explaining, trusting the audience to read between the lines, to notice when a character's choice of words betrays their fear or when their sudden bluntness masks guilt. Even exposition is woven into conversation in a way that feels organic. Background details slip out in arguments, in casual observations, in half-finished sentences that leave you curious. And in the heat of action, the dialogue doesn't disappear, it becomes terse, economical, carrying weight not just in what's said but in how it's delivered, the tone, the pauses, the breath between words. By the time the credits roll, you don't just remember the events, you remember the way they were spoken into existence. Havoc steps into the action thriller arena with the confidence of a film that knows exactly where its roots are but isn't afraid to twist the formula. It delivers all the familiar beats, high-speed chases, gritty street fights, tense standoffs, but layers them with a sense of unpredictability that keeps you from settling into autopilot. Instead of leaning too heavily on the typical good versus evil framework, it plays in the gray areas, where morality bends and loyalty can be as dangerous as betrayal. Suspense is not just built through ticking clocks and narrow escapes, it comes from not knowing who will still be standing when the dust settles, or whether the hero you're rooting for is making the right choices at all. The action doesn't overshadow the drama, it's woven into it. Every punch, every explosion feels like an extension of the story rather than a distraction from it. When humor does slip in, it's quick and cutting, breaking tension just enough to let you breathe before tightening its grip again. There's a respect for genre conventions, but also a willingness to subvert them. Scenes that would normally be predictable are given small twists, whether through character decisions, setting changes, or the way conflicts resolve. The balance is razor-sharp. Adrenaline-fueled moments get their rush without losing the weight of the stakes, and quieter scenes are just as charged, carrying the same intensity without a single bullet fired. In the end, it's a film that doesn't just operate within the genre, it plays with it, stretches it, and reminds you why these stories have such enduring pull. Havoc doesn't just throw its characters into chaos for the sake of spectacle. It uses that chaos to hold up a mirror to the world outside the screen. Beneath the explosions, betrayals, and gunfire, there's an undercurrent of commentary about corruption, power struggles, and the fragile nature of trust in a system designed to break it. It's a story where the lines between law and crime blur so much that it's hard to tell which side is more dangerous, and that moral fog feels eerily familiar to real-world headlines. The film digs into how authority can be both protector and predator, how loyalty can be weaponized, and how ordinary people often get crushed between the gears of political and criminal machinations. What's impressive is that these ideas aren't hammered in through speeches or clumsy exposition, they're lived out through the choices the characters make and the consequences they face. You feel the weight of social inequality in the run-down neighborhoods, the desperation in backroom deals, and the quiet resignation of those who know the system is rigged but have no choice but to play along. Even when the pace is blistering, these themes slip in like shadows, shaping the tension and deepening the stakes. It's a reminder that action films can be more than just noise and movement. They can spark uncomfortable questions about the way power works, and who pays the price when it's abused. Havoc doesn't just ask you to watch, it dares you to feel every beat, every blow, every breathless pause. From the opening scenes, it pulls you in with that uneasy sense that something big is about to happen, and once it does, it's like being strapped into a ride you didn't realize was moving this fast. The fight sequences have that jaw-clenching, edge-of-your-seat energy where you catch yourself holding your breath. The quieter moments land just as hard, sneaking in with a sudden wave of emotion that can catch you off guard. There are bursts of adrenaline that make you want to lean forward and cheer, moments so tense your stomach knots, and sudden reveals that make you sit back in stunned silence, replaying the scene in your head just to process what you saw. Even after the credits roll, it lingers, not in the way a puzzle does, but in the way a vivid dream stays with you, making you question what it meant and why it hit you the way it did. It's the kind of film that sparks debates about character choices, hidden motives, and those little background details you only catch on a second or third viewing. Whether you're there for the action, the drama, or the layered storytelling, Havoc knows how to keep you invested and make sure you walk away with something to talk about. Havoc enters the arena of gritty crime thrillers with a swagger that's both familiar and refreshingly unpredictable. It carries shades of films like The Raid and John Wick, especially in its relentless action choreography and unflinching camera work, yet it never feels like a carbon copy. Instead, it borrows the intensity of those titles while twisting the formula with its own brand of chaos and layered character drama. Where many action films choose either heart or havoc, this one insists on both, blending bone-crunching combat with personal stakes that actually matter. Compared to other works in Gareth Evans' filmography, it feels like an evolution, retaining the kinetic, claustrophobic fights of the Raid series but adding a more sprawling, politically tangled plot. In the wider crime thriller landscape, it stands apart by refusing to let the narrative take a back seat to the set pieces. Yes, it has the familiar beats, a determined anti-hero, a criminal underworld, shifting loyalties, but it plays them with a sharper edge, a grittier realism, and a willingness to dwell in the messiness between action beats. It's like watching a well-worn genre suit get tailored with unexpected details, making something you've seen before feel just a little dangerous and new again. Havoc hides its richest rewards in the details, where symbols and metaphors slip into the chaos almost unnoticed. The city itself becomes a living metaphor, its crumbling buildings and shadowy alleys reflecting the moral decay of the world its characters inhabit. Broken windows, flickering neon signs, and rain-slick streets aren't just set dressing, they're silent storytellers, whispering about lives cracked under pressure and hope fading in the dark. Even the fight scenes carry symbolic weight. The close-quarters combat feels like a physical manifestation of the suffocating corruption, every punch and grapple a desperate struggle against forces that seem impossible to escape. Recurring imagery, like narrow corridors and locked doors, serves as a visual echo of the characters' limited choices, their paths narrowing until confrontation is inevitable. Costuming and color palettes also play their part. Muted tones dominate the criminal underworld, while rare splashes of color, like a red jacket or a warm light, signal fleeting moments of truth or vulnerability. These metaphors deepen the narrative without slowing it down, rewarding viewers who watch closely with an extra layer of meaning. Beneath the gunfire and grit, the film is quietly telling you that the real havoc isn't just in the streets, it's in the soul. Havoc wears two different hats depending on how you slot it into context. As a potential franchise entry, it feels like the kind of film that quietly builds a universe while pretending to be a self-contained knockout, seeding mythology, loose ends, and character debts that beg for follow-up without nagging you mid-scene. Think of Walker's moral erosion, Ellie's newfound edge, and Mother's inscrutable network as story nodes that can be pulled into sequels, prequels, or sideways spin-offs. A sequel could follow the political fallout and the Beaumont dynasty's unraveling. A prequel could trace Mother's rise and the Triad's old bargains, and a limited series TV extension might luxuriate in the city's smaller crimes and the forensic details the film only hints at. Franchise-wise, Havoc does the smart things. It deepens its world building through texture rather than exposition, introduces morally complicated players who can carry arcs across multiple installments, and drops visual leitmotifs and plot MacGuffins that writers can pick up later, while also flirting with franchise risks like diluting stakes if every threat can be reversed in future parts or over-explaining mysteries that were more compelling when half-hidden. If you read it against the director's broader filmography, it can act as both continuation and departure, repeating signature obsessions, tight choreography, moral ambiguity, urban claustrophobia, while adding new tonal notes or broader political tangents, which keeps longtime fans interested and opens avenues for tonal sequels that tilt harder into character study or larger-scale crime warfare. On the other hand, if Havoc were understood as historical filmmaking rather than franchise fiction, its job shifts. Historical context demands sourcing, fidelity to period detail, and a respect for the real-world forces it dramatizes. Production design, dialect coaching, archival inserts, and accurate depiction of institutional procedures all become ways to anchor the drama so viewers feel transported rather than merely entertained. Historical films often compress timelines and invent composite characters to keep narrative pulse, and Havoc's choices would be judged on whether those compressions preserve emotional truth without falsifying key facts. Accuracy in small things, uniform insignia, the way a courtroom runs, the social texture of neighborhoods, builds trust, while bold dramatization of events must be handled with transparency and sensitivity, especially when dealing with political corruption, police violence, or communities who might be represented. Whether franchise or historical piece, the film's contextual value rests on balance. It can enrich an ongoing saga by cultivating recurring themes and character depths, or it can illuminate a past moment by using cinematic economy to make complex events palpable. In both modes, the smartest choices are those that respect continuity, of plot, of place, of consequence, or history, of voice, fact, and affected people, while still leaving room for the kind of storytelling breath that lets characters grow, contradictions breathe, and audiences keep wanting more. Havoc reportedly carried a production budget of around $80 million, and you can feel every cent of it working hard on screen, not because it's blowing cash on endless CGI set pieces, but because the money is channeled into places that make the world feel tangible, gritty, and alive. The rain-slick streets glisten under perfectly placed lighting, interiors look authentically worn down rather than hastily dressed, and the fight choreography clearly benefited from weeks of rehearsal instead of being thrown together last minute. Even the background extras look like people with backstories rather than filler, which is a subtle sign that the production invested in casting, costuming, and detail work across the board. Compared to bloated blockbusters that spend twice as much yet feel hollow, Havoc's $80 million budget is a masterclass in targeted spending, stretching resources by focusing on atmosphere, location work, and meticulously crafted stunts instead of wasteful spectacle. On the box office side, numbers tell their own version of the story. A film like Havoc doesn't just succeed or fail based on its quality, it's about timing, marketing, and audience appetite. If it premiered in a crowded window stacked with superhero sequels and animated juggernauts, its darker tone might have made it a tougher sell for the casual moviegoer. But a smart marketing push, trailers dripping with tension, viral clips of bone-crunching fight scenes, and cast interviews teasing moral ambiguity, could give it the momentum it needs. Early buzz from action fans and critics would be crucial, because this is the kind of movie that thrives on word of mouth. The "you have to see this in theaters" effect. There's also the fascinating dance between marketing spend and return. Studios sometimes pour massive sums into promoting a mid-budget film, hoping for breakout success, only to see box office earnings stall. Other times, a more modest campaign paired with strong festival buzz turns a movie into a sleeper hit that triples its budget. Havoc feels like a contender for that second path, a slow-burn performer in theaters, possibly reignited by an award-season re-release or a high-profile streaming debut that exposes it to millions who missed it initially. If it hits the right combination of targeted marketing, critical acclaim, and audience excitement, its $80 million investment could pay off in a way that's as satisfying and unpredictable as the film's own storyline. Havoc is the kind of film that practically begs to be experienced in a darkened theater, where the sound system can make every raindrop, gunshot, and grunt from a bruising fight scene reverberate in your bones. The cinematography thrives on big-screen immersion, wide shots of chaotic streets, neon reflections shimmering in puddles, and intimate close-ups during tense negotiations all look richer when your eyes can drink in every detail without the distractions of home. The fight choreography is especially rewarding in this setting, as quick camera movements and fluid tracking shots keep the action coherent and intense, something that can lose its punch on smaller screens. That said, there's also a certain appeal to catching Havoc at home, particularly if you have a high-quality 4K setup and surround sound. Streaming or digital rental means you can pause to dissect the more intricate action sequences, rewind to catch subtle bits of dialogue that reveal character motivations, or slow down the film's blink-and-you-miss-it moments of visual storytelling. It also offers the freedom to rewatch favorite scenes immediately, because let's be honest, some of these confrontations are the kind of thing you'll want to revisit the moment they're over. If it's available on a major streaming platform, the film's intensity will still hold up, but there's no denying that the theatrical experience amplifies its atmosphere. For the fullest impact, it's best to see Havoc in theaters first, let the scale of it wash over you, and then enjoy the luxury of picking it apart at home later. It's the type of movie that delivers two different but equally satisfying experiences depending on how you choose to watch.